All right, so tonight we are going to add a little bit onto the character Usula that we generated as a purposely built multi-class character. I took him all the way to level 20, and I demonstrated how you could have two opposing classes, Barbarian and Wizard, still be a viable character in 5th edition D&D. Is he going to be the best Barbarian or the best Wizard? No. Though through the power of storytelling, he's still compelling, he's still functional, and he can still give hits and take hits. Part of that story was him living with his sister, Usula, because we have Usawa and then Usula. Okay, Samo, thank you for letting me know that there's some music coming through. So we have the two siblings here, and she was incorporated into a story because she was leading into what would be his campaign break between Barbarian and picking up Wizard through an unfortunate series of events. Now, in order to go through all of the characters that we've made together this week on the channel, I wanted to give a summary of them, and if we're going to make a module effectively as a group, I wanted to have a diverse set of characters. Well, if we set the mod or the level not at Usula's greatest height, but at the point before he lost his sister, it's a nice solid. We have her at level 8 because that's spoilers. That's about the last level that she gets on this side of the soil. If you understand what I'm saying. And the other characters are around there. Some are higher, some are lower. For what we're doing tonight, going over the concept of party building, that's not really going to be. If we were sitting down at a table, yeah, I'd want us all to be the same level. If we're just talking concepts, that's what we're going to go for, is the concept of the character. And since we didn't generate Usula, we only talked about her vaguely, I wanted to put her down on digital paper and go over who Usula is as of now, but will be was. I love playing with words. Will be was, but currently is this. Let me see if I can angle this a little bit better. That's kind of bugging me out here. That's a little bit better, I guess. I don't know if it's being weird. I have a light that I'm trying to get into a position. I don't know if I need to mount it on the wall, but I'd feel bad kind of driving a screw into it just for a temporary LED light. Oh no, here they come. Oh, pardon me. This isn't me being sleepy. This is me. My body is I'm still getting used to streaming, talking energetically, constantly to you all. And these are sort of reflexive, like, hey, take a break. Remember to breathe. The important things. All right, so who is Usula Grenoly? Mechanically, we'll get into her personality in a little bit here. We have her statted out as a level 8 College of Lore Bard, meaning she is a skill monkey. She has knowledges. She is an all-around, like, kind of useful person. When we come down to her stats, you can see that Constitution right here was made her dump stat. And there, Con every character needs, and many people might not make Con their dump stat. I did so with her character for roleplay reasons, because she has some kind of a wasting illness. She's sickly in some capacity. I believe someone suggested that she has multiple sclerosis from last night's stream when we were talking about her brother and how he cares for her. And while that's more of a mental thing, I wanted to show that she is fragile in this case. And so here she is, even at level 8, and she only has 35 hit points. And that's because, oh, pardon me. Oh, I hate this because it seems like I'm being rude to you all. I mean, I know that you're not thinking that. Well, at least I hope not. Otherwise, come on. But I don't know. I like treating this like a conversation, as if we're sitting down together. I'm making eye contact with you individually, as well as the yous, plural, that are in the chat, watching, lurking, commenting. Which, by the way, this is effectively a talk show. Feel free to comment back, offer suggestions, ask questions. These aren't my characters. These are our characters that we are building together. All right, so it's important for her as a bard and for her as her character to have a high charisma. So boom, that's her highest stat. She also was going to be intelligent because she's not too active physically. She would be reading books, being observant, talking with people who would come by to trade. As well, that's going to play into her brother, right? Because as we're building this barbarian wizard, necromancer, actually, he needed a high intelligence as well to start. And so it made sense that both of the kids were very keen. They were, gifted, or they were just very intellectually observant. And so while one took a barbarian route and the other took a bardic route, they both have this solid core of knowledge that they were given. And we can retroactively, as storytellers, go back and attribute that to who were their parents, or if we're going with it takes a village to raise a child, what was their tribe like, or what was their region, or their little city or nomads like. Dex was more important, right? Because we're building her to be kind of a little slender. She's more nimble. She doesn't do a lot of heavy lifting, but she can, she's playing instruments. She's doing all this fine handwork. She's maybe even like stitching, like if the brother comes back because he's a trapper and he has ripped clothes and all this, she can stitch or embroider, do things in a support way, because it's just the two of them for a while here in their youth. Her wisdom was a little lower, and then because we're not playing her as a physical character, her strength isn't going to be high. But for roleplay purposes, her con. Otherwise, we probably would have made her strength 8. That would have been a solid switch, because having strength as a dump stat isn't necessarily bad, especially because you can have weapons run off of dex, and you're getting defense and offense if we're speaking mechanically. But here we're going to take a roleplay flavor, and we're going to make her a little sickly. This is something that I could challenge you as players to do as well. There is the statistical best fit, if we're min-maxing, if we're doing things mechanically. Would you have the gumption as a player to take a character that you want to convey more as frail, of mind or body? In this case, we have more of a bodily frailness. And be willing to take that hit and roleplay through it, or find ways around it, or even use it to challenge your DM, not even as a showcase for you. You talked to your DM before, just as this advice for building the party is going to say, because we're going to be PCs, we're going to get together and then present to our DM, who will also be me/us, and say, I'm going to run a character, and she's not going to be able to take hits really well. I'm not going to run her in the middle of combat. She's too smart for that. But just so you're aware, she is frail, and I'm going to be role playing to that as a way to try and overcome these limitations, right? So it's about empowerment and positivity, not running the trope of, okay, it's a helpless little girl. She's just weak, and I statted her as being a weak girl because girls are weak, or guys, and however you want to do it, right? You have sickly, little Tim with his crutch or whatever. There's a stereotype in that sense, and people would get it. It's more convenient, I guess, if you're a DM and you throw that out as an NPC, since you're trying to make several people understand one character instead of you're the one character that everyone is already understanding. But to go for the not best min-max choice, do you have that gumption to do so? All right. Anyway, let's go through here. While her brother was statted as an Outlander trapper, she has taken on, because of the circumstances surrounding them, more of the hermit background. And specifically here, the number 4 in her life of seclusion, which is, I retreated from society after a life-altering event. In the story that we created last night, or depending if you're watching this on YouTube in order, it would have been the last video, there is some great force of nature or supernature that is plaguing the area and has driven them off and separated them from their family by distance or death. And so, because she's not the type to go out trapping and exploring, that's more for her rough and tumble brother, she is the hermit. Now, she's social, but she's just taken on this more pensive, reclusive thinking and going in that direction. Her personality traits are, I'm utterly serene, even in the face of disaster. And this is important too, because she wants to be strong like her brother. She doesn't want to say if something hurts, even though her brother says, you got to tell me if something hurts. But she takes it in stride. She wants everything to be okay. She doesn't want to slow anyone down. And this is going to play into things coming up a little bit later. Also, she's oblivious to etiquette and social expectations. Just because we have a character who, well, we know is going to have a tragic end, doesn't mean that we can't also have humor. And so, as she and her brother live together, and then maybe they adventure through the lands a little bit before tragedy strikes, this is a personality trait that can help fill her out more. If she's oblivious to etiquette and social expectations, they wander into a village, and he wants to trade the furs that he's trapped in order to get maybe food or other supplies. And she just walks up and takes an apple and starts eating it. And, not out of maliciousness. Maybe she thought, oh, well, I thought we were trading for that. But she just didn't think to ask because it was there and that's what she's used to. Or it's, I don't know, maybe you're describing a scene where the brother's trying to negotiate with a merchant, right? And he's doing his best to put on this very stoic, fresh face. And then she's just sitting there, or not sitting there, but, she's minding her own business, and she just sort of reaches up and, tries to pick a booger out of her nose. And then, she kind of like looks at it, sniffs it, and flicks it away. And the shopkeep is just like looking at her like, excuse me, young woman, what did you just do? Or, she like, she does a smelfie. That's the popular word now. She does a smelfie, or, some other, Nickelodeon humor. I'll leave your imagination to that. So that makes her a dynamic character. Because just like any of us, we don't know when our adventure will end. I'll put it that way. Yet we are still here every day that we can be. We're trying to be the best person we can, and there is combinations of tragedy and comedy that help us be who we are. Her ideal is live and let live. Meddling in the affairs of others only causes trouble. This makes her a little bit more reclusive. So instead of wanting to just go out and engage with the world, it's making her a little bit more cautious. She knows that she needs to rely on other people. She certainly does for her older brother, Usula. But she doesn't want to look for trouble, because maybe that's how she's comprehending how things happen to her village, right? Trouble found them, so why go back out? How do you write a book-smart person with that kind of social absent-mindedness? That can come in a couple different ways, Seo. Because she just reads books, and if you read a textbook, it's not going to tell you that it's, impolite to, to just sort of fart in the elevator, right? You can be a math genius. You could study science. You can be intelligent. You can have knowledge of the world and not realize that it is impolite to spit or to chew with your mouth open or whatever the local custom is. Elbows on the table or not, or dare I say, not have your pinky out while drinking tea. So it's just this, she's so involved in the things that she knows that she's not really worried about the context or the social layers of how it fits. Just that something fits together and how they fit together. Does that answer your question, Seo? If not, maybe give me a more specific prompt and I can try and re-answer it for you. Bonds, nothing is more important than my brother, which is based off of down here. Number one, nothing is more important than the other members of my hermitage, which is kind of the same thing. But in this case, it's the two of them versus the world, right? We have kind of, if you've seen the movie Blue Lagoon, we have this, two kids have been severed off from their family, their society, the things that they knew, and they're in the wilds and they have to learn. Now, in this case, if they're both learned, they had to have brought along some books or they even like found an old library of someone or even of an old hermit. And so they were able to educate themselves. And this is storytelling stuff we can get into. So Seo says, so either some sort of autism spectrum and or little to no contact. Yeah. And you know what? I actually am glad that you brought that up because these are things that in the context of role playing, we can discuss openly, right? We're not here to, make fun of people or whatnot because, you can't help, some of the things that you have here in life. However, because we're putting this in the context of story, we can discuss things like, mental or physical illnesses, such as autism or developmental disorders, maybe even like a congenital defect, being born without an arm, or succumbing to a disease, or developing cancer. We can talk about sex and religion and politics because we're doing so in a particular context that isn't meant to be taken personally by you. We're discussing the figures that we have on the game board in front of us. And in that way, we're almost philosophers ourselves. Or, you think of like the Greek gods sitting on Mount Olympus and they have their chessboard out and everyone moving. So we're these great thinkers. And we're saying, well, in the context of this story, what if one of the characters did actually have a mental illness of some kind? Maybe Usula, because autism is not something new. It's not like it just suddenly came around in the 90s, and then had a twin of ADD or something like that. It's been around. It might have been called different things. We've called things like shakes and spasms, or moron and idiot were actually medical term levels for for levels of mental retardation. Or for like craziness in mental hospitals at one point in time. So I know this is a bit of a side point, Sale, but this is something that I want to develop. We can comfortably talk about these things. We can touch on them because it can be important to the character and even important for us to try and fathom something that maybe we don't understand, or maybe something that we don't normally align ourselves with. The kind of easy mode is saying, well, I'm a boy and I'll play a girl character, and, you go from there, and sure, maybe you try and look at things in a different perspective if that's how you want to do it. In this case, you might not have anyone in your family who has a mental or physical illness or disability, but if you're going to play as someone who's suffering from a disease, maybe in this case, Usula, we have her as a young girl because both of them, she's 15 here by the time that she passes, which is kind of the photo here. But their adventure started a couple years ago. So like we're talking like 10 and 12 is when the pre-story happens. And so we put ourselves back in age, or, we touch on all of the wonderful things that become politicized in this world of, age and gender and politics and religion and sex, societal conformity, laws and taboos and customs and things like that. So, I don't have it listed on her character sheet, but if that's how you wanted to run her, more power to you. If you're not doing it in a way that's like intentionally supposed to be offensive, like if you're running Heck, we can even go to her brother, and let's say that he was a classic barbarian, you know, his dump stat was int, and you just go around going, her. Like, there's a point where you're, you know, making a jest, and then there's a point where you're just kind of going that one step too far. Those are lines in the sand, though. I'm not here to tell you. I'm not going to be a social justice warrior on things. I'm not here to tell you what that line is, because that is something you and your DM and your other party members are going to draw in the sandbox of your game. Seo says it makes it much more human. I agree. And you can't have a perfect character. In role-playing, that's called a Mary Sue, right? You have no flaws. Anything that's a perceived weakness is actually a strength, because you know it's a weakness, so you can actively cover for it. But because you're strong in the other things, you won't fail in them. If you get what I'm saying. So this would be a roleplay challenge character here, and if any of you wanted this character, I would suggest trying to build her and roll with it. Especially if you maybe secretly, unbeknownst to the other party members, especially if you have someone in your party and you two have discussed, and you're like, oh yeah, we'll be brother sister adventurers. That's cool. You know, we'll develop this relationship. We're on our own, kind of against the world, and you secretly talk to the DM and say, look, I want her to die by some point in the story. Can you please consider that? And I'll roll something else, but I want to provide a compelling story for everyone else. That's a bravery test, to use Bob Ross terms, right? Okay, so she has this bond because she doesn't want to slow him down. She doesn't want to hamper him. And, you know, there's just this affection because he's trying to dote on her and take care of her and be, you know, a very good big brother in this case. And in return, she's offering her own set of skills. It's not just a one-sided thing. We'll get the skills here because she has a ton of them. She likes keeping secrets and won't share them with anyone. Now, this could even include her brother, and it will end up being one of the key factors to her tragic end. Every character has a flaw, because we as human beings have flaws. And now this is the obvious one, not necessarily like a roleplay consideration like what, Seo, you were talking about earlier. Alright, now, her background as a hermit, she gets a feature of discovery. And I think for the storytelling purposes, it would make a lot of sense if what she discovered was the nature of this force that displaced them. She found it in a book. Maybe she pieced it together through some investigation. I don't have her proficient in that, but that's not really going to be relevant, especially by being a bard, and I'll get to that in a second. But she has some great revelation, and as a player, you should talk about that with your DM. Hermit really it quasi forces you to talk to your DM before the game starts to work in what your discovery is. Being a human, I took her variant, which means that instead of +1 to all her ability scores, because I did not want to give her a plus anything to her physical. It's part of her nature. So I went with a variant, which is +1 to 2 ability scores, an extra skill learned, and a feat. And so the feat that I wanted to give her was Inspiring Leader as her human feat. And this allows her to grant temporary hit points to party members, mechanically. How this would play out, you know, in the morning, she wakes up, maybe she sings a beautiful song. If you're wondering, I have a cat off to my side, so you might get one on camera here soon. I'm trying to soothe the savage beast before she comes up and takes over. You know, so she gets up in the morning, she sings the song, Sing Me the Song of Your People. Maybe it's a song that she made for them, right? Her and her brother. Or it's a lullaby she remembers that her parents told her. And so what this does is gives them temporary hit points. Both of them. So it makes her a little hardier. So it's that kind of like morning, okay, I'm up. I'm going to take a walk around because I feel good and rested. And then maybe I'll get tired, you know, during midday. And for him, he's a rough and tumble trapper out in the wilds, you know, hunting animals, doing all this. So having some temporary hit points for him wouldn't hurt either. And then later on, instead of taking an ability score adjustment, because we're role-playing this, she doesn't want to fall behind. She wants to keep up with her brother. Well, as a barbarian, you get naturally increased speed. So if she wants to keep up with him, she has to do the same thing as well. And so she took mobile as another feat, because this gives her an increased speed of 10. Then when she uses the dash action, there's some other things. That was the main one. But you can read those up here, or you can check it. I don't know if it's in an SRD or something like that. But when you make a melee attack against a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks, whether you hit or not. So it's making her a little bit more survivable and a little bit more quick, which is exactly what she wants. And by the time that she would get this, after taking her first bump in, because she gets 2. Her first, she's going from charisma 16 to 18. And that's her, that's her maturing. This is now, she's going from, 10 or 12 or whatever, and now she's going into like young, not even young adulthood, but she's the like puberty, right? She's growing up. She's becoming a woman now. And so a part of this is expressing herself through her charm and her words and her music and just her desire for a better world. And so that was her first stat bump. And then at level 8, this is where she finally, she's getting healthier, and I'll get into that in the story. We had him find, like an herbal remedy or something that's made her healthier. So this feat is now reflecting the fact that she has improved somewhat, and she can keep up. And here she is. She's at the height of everything that she's wanted before things happen. Ooh. Weapons and stuff, I threw that in here. It's not terribly important for what we're doing, but, to give you an idea. This is just standard stuff down here. Now, going over to skills, all these aren't filled in. If she's proficient in it, she gets her proficiency bonus, plus the bonus from the skill. There are going to be, many exceptions. One is she gets something called expertise, which means she can add her proficiency bonus twice. Oh, hey, there she is. Hey, don't claw on my chair. So she took that in deception and performance. So those are going to be higher. If you look here, that's why she's rocking a plus 11 at level 8 in those 2 skills. As well, yes, can I help you? What's this? Okay. As well, she gets something called, I changed it to Jill, but she gets something called Jack of all trades as a bard, which means for every skill, I have a calico mustache, for every skill that she is not proficient in, she gets to add half of her proficiency bonus rounded down. So it's almost like she's not, but she is proficient in a lot of different things. And so this would show that she's at home, she's studying, and she's still doing things, right? Because she's still getting this quasi-proficiency in athletics. So it's not that she can't chop firewood. Maybe she just can't do it for long periods of time. Things along those lines. So she's very useful. She still has skills despite, these physical setbacks. She shares the same languages as her brother by the same means. The tools that she learns, she gets 3 instruments from Bard, and one of those is a pan flute. This is going to be important, because if you weren't here for her brother, this is her primary instrument. When I say a pan flute, it's, like the sticks of different lengths, and then you play, there's the 2 levels of it. Kind of like a wooden harmonica, but it's more pipes instead of vibrating metal. I'm not really worried about armor. I'm not really worried about her weapons for our storytelling. So we have her here. She's a young adult. By the time that they've reached here in the story, she's 15. She's a little shorter, 5 foot, but she's still standing over a dwarf, and 100 pounds. And I was thinking maybe we could even go a little lighter than that, depending on how we wanted to present her. Just because she is, more svelte doesn't mean that she still doesn't have this grace or a beautiful voice or sparkling eyes or things along those lines. Which, again, makes it all the more humorous, as if you're playing her and you get into it and you go to this personality trait of, I'm oblivious to etiquette and social expectations. because you have a you have this very charming person, who's just kind of sitting there and kind of digging for gold. Okay, so this was the mock-up of Usula. This is Usula's. This was Usula's sister, and as we come down here, here's Usula. The story that we're plotting is going to really be focused on this portion of the character. As we made a 20th level character, we just sort of said, okay, every level, this is a defining event that happens. And we're kind of using milestones as if we're writing the book chapters based on this, or if we're making a mod. So his story is more detailed because he's the focus. She's coming along and could be a playable character in some regard, but isn't as important to the story as him, who's going to go on to survive and do things. So we're going to involve, he's a simple trapper. He goes to find medicine for his sister before some disaster. She's temporarily healed. They move along. They survive. The relationship grows. There's the disasters avoided or averted, and there's a bond now. Right, it's us against the world. Like that's when the hubris starts setting in. Oh, you're cured. You're keeping up. You're doing this stuff. Then they have some sort of big moment together that solidifies that Superman syndrome. However, afterwards, she realizes that she overdid it, right? That's when she goes to the creek, to get some water for dinner or to answer nature's call or something, and she does the cough and there's like blood, or I don't know, it's like suddenly she has like a searing pain in her chest or in her gut or along her back or whatever the manifestations are. Maybe she... if it was MS, like it was talked about before, it could be, nausea, dizzying, like she just sort of passes out, or she has some sort of miniature seizure, something along those lines to show, oh no, it's back, and the tension raises. The disaster that they thought they avoided is revisited, and so this is level 8, right? This is kind of, it's at her apex right when she's starting to go down again, and it's going to go down hard because she's going to die. And our hero, the brother, is going to feel helpless in this regard, despite being this big, tough barbarian, this doting older brother. They had this us against the world mentality, and that came crashing down around him. And as we filled in here, especially as he goes on to learn necromancy after events that we can fill in, he naturally has brown eyes. And so if you imagine his irises, they're brown, and the pupils are black. And if you look into his eyes now, you see just the barest hint of a girl, as if she's laying in a grave, surrounded by dirt, right? So his brown eyes are like the dirt of the grave. And so his eyes constantly reflect the last time that he saw her. That's not a magic spell. There's no mechanics to it. But it's really powerful. I mean, if it doesn't bring a tear to your eye, I think you can vividly imagine, what's going on with this situation. And then to make it a little bit even more somber, while all this came a little bit later, because as an Outlander, he gets to learn an instrument. And I said, okay, a pan flute sounds good, right? You can make it. It's really easy. Well, it's relatively easy, reeds, and you can kind of bind things together. But we're building a necromancer. I'm like, okay, so it needs to be a little bit grim. What can we do? And this is where the sister even existed. So what he did was he ended up making a pan flute from his sister's finger bones, like her hands. And if not finger, I mean, we could say someplace else, but... So this way, those beautiful hands that would mend his clothes, that would play the lullaby at night, that would wake him up in the morning and, greet him. Those hands that turned books, that drew pictures, did all the things she's skilled at doing. He still has those, and no one can take those beautiful hands away from him as they continue to play him sweet music, just in a rather somber and morose way. It's getting pretty heavy, isn't it? I don't want to bring the mood of the story and our conversation down, but you have to, again, you sometimes got to have this real talk. We can have happy-go-lucky slapstick fantasy. It's like the Slayers anime, or there's Rune Hunters and Ruin Explorers, those who hunt elves, all sorts of uh, different titles, and we can have slapstick here. With this character, it's kept very real, and it draws everyone. You kind of start leaning forward as the story goes on. So anyway, okay, that's Usula. I went a little bit into Usawa. Now, we're not going to consider him to be a finished Barbarian 10, Wizard 10 for an epic level 20th character. This story is going to take place in this section here. He's going to be no more than a Barbarian 10. In fact, if we only statted out his sister to 8, he's probably 8 or 9. His specific ability is not going to matter for what we're doing by forming a party. We're just going to consider him a Barbarian. We then have other characters that we made through the week, and you can go back and watch those on YouTube through the whole character creation and backstory process, or you can find a very brief synopsis in the channel feed on this page. After we make a character, I try and put a synopsis of it, although I think my numbering kind of got off there, so instead of being at number 18 or 19, we're 1 or 2 ahead, because I had a little derp out. Ah, you're back. Well, thank you for gracing us with your presence. So, we then made Palor Malincast. This is a male half-orc rogue, and the way that he was completely random, and the way that he rounded out, especially here, midlife, he was maxing out his midlife. We had him as this Indiana Jones style, right? He's lawful neutral, so he'll go into temples and take artifacts as long as it's done in the proper way. But we said, well, he's going to be this artifact hunter. He's going to go in, he'll have adventures, and he's that's just his style and personality. As the character was developed, now we're not running him as a level 13 necessarily, but we're going to have this be his one last adventure before he retires, maybe into being a professor instead of just an adventurer, or doing part-time stuff, or writing about his adventures and making books. So this is where we can also tie in our characters. His bond is he has an ancient text that holds terrible secrets that must not fall into the wrong hands. Could that play into this barbarian who suffered the grievous loss of his sister and has almost lost himself, and then comes to find necromantic power somehow? Hashtag just saying. All this stuff happens, and this was this was random. You have to think, make connections, see it all around you. And if one isn't obvious, then you can manufacture one. It's all up here. If you can reasonably explain it, it can happen. Then we had... I don't know why he blurped out there. Then we had Dura Shamraka, and you have to roll the R. That's what we determined. Shamraka. She was a randomly rolled multi-class that actually happened before our artificially crafted one, so it worked out very well. She's also a half-orc, female, and her randomly rolled classes were Paladin and Sorcerer. That works out very well because they both cast off of Charisma, the same stat. Unlike with Barbarian Wizard, there's not a lot of overlap there. And so we went through, we randomly rolled her background, soldier, she was a support staff, and so her story generally was she was a combat nurse in some sort of... in some kind of an operation, a wartime operation. Her devotion there led to her paladinhood, right? So she was in battle and she could heal. Though after some kind of a tragedy, and I'm very quickly referencing this. If you want to read this while I'm narrating, please go ahead. If you're looking at this on YouTube, pause the video and go from there. But she suffered something happened that was very tragic, and this order that she thought she had broke loose. And suddenly, because we randomly rolled, not only was she a sorcerer, she was a wild magic sorcerer. So you have an Oath of Devotion paladin, the painfully lawful good paladin, who is now taking on this aspect. You know, the powers inside her have been building and building, and is now lashing out in chaotic ways. And so it's giving her this kind of dual nature. Not necessarily an over the top, but she can heal, she can harm, she has utility, she has destruction. She is orderly, yet she has these bouts of just needing to, shout and let her magic just explode out for whatever effects. It's a dynamic character. It's really cool. You can do a lot with multi-classing. Though I'd always talk to your DM about it, because maybe he or she doesn't want that to happen or whatever. Standard issue, asterisks here and there. And she also took Inspiring Leader. So you guys are getting temporary hit points for days in this party. Oh, but you can see so much stuff here that she's getting, and it's so dynamic. She'd be so much fun to roleplay. Well, it so happens that we have another character who is serving in the military. Now, while Abigail here, it took the folk hero route, number 10, which we randomly rolled, said that she gained fame by serving in a lord's army, and she did something spectacular there. And when she returned home to her people, she was the hometown hero. So now we can see, hey, we're kind of getting some bonds between characters. I don't know if Delcorin is in here. Let me check real quick. No, at least at this snapshot, it doesn't look like he's in here. Delcorin had rolled up a character before this, and as we were randomly generating this, he's like, "Oh gosh, this is like my character's crazy sister." And so in that way, does her brother or Delcorin's character exist in this, as a PDF in this world? No. It is kind of like a fun meta-knowledge nod. Hey, so it seems that Abigail Summersday has a brother also. Well, it looks like there's going to be for sure a sibling adventuring pair here with Usula and Usula. And so while her brother may be off on some other adventure, she can at least relate with one or both of them by saying, oh yeah, my brother. But whereas these two have a very close bond together, at least as Delcorin was playing it up, he almost regrets his sister, like in a way more like comedic fashion. And so now you have these two that are sort of playing off each other in different ways too, and these are adding fun boundaries to the story that we're telling. Okay, so we have some very basic blurbs. We have some background on them, and when we come back over to our document, we can now write it out. We are PCs sitting at the table saying, okay, Sayo, what do you want to roll? Or, okay, let's see, who else is lurking in here? Okay, Rytel, who are you going to play? Okay, Sayo, so you're playing the Sorcerer Paladin. That's really cool. Shadzar, Cerodium, you guys have characters too, and now we're all players sitting together, and we have these concepts, and we want to see how can we make them work as PCs in a world that this external force of a DM is generating. So we each would sit down, maybe over some, pizza, Thai food, or something like that, and we lay it out. Here's our character, here's our class, and then now these are the final values for all the characters as they exist. If we're going to set a level, whether it's starting level 1 or whatever, again, that's not going to matter for what we're doing tonight, but you get the gist, right? If as a character that you're going to go Pal Sork at some point in time, you can still start out and stat yourself at level 1 to get prepared for it. I mean, I guess I could bring up almost like Pokemon breeding analogies, right? If I'm wearing this Slowbro shirt here, you can set up for stats at a later point in time. But as they stand, we can see, all right, well, Abigail's not really the face of the party, nor is Paylor, nor is Usula. Of the party, because again, we don't know she's going to die, Usula is going to be the face, which is going to be fun because she doesn't have social etiquette and she kind of is reclusive. Though, Dura here isn't bad at being a face. She would just do it differently or, go from there. She's the backup face. So we say, okay, so we have a face. Who's the strong man? Well, definitely Usula, though it seems like almost all the characters here, we have a strong party. And so we would get together and say, okay, we're generally good. It looks like we're going to do maybe a lot of melee. Like what's... Actually, now that I'm looking at this, why do I have Abigail? Yeah, I must have wrote something wrong, because I'm looking at her, I'm like, why wouldn't Abigail be the face? She's a warlock. My gosh. I must have repeated someone's from somewhere else, because she has a 19, a 14, an 8. There we go. I knew we had an int dump somewhere. She can be the best face, but she should not be the face. Do not let Abigail be the face of the party, everyone. And I'll say this as being the one playing Abigail, or whatever. Oh, gosh. 16 and 10. Sorry about that. Oh, Sao, you know me too well. Yes, or so if Sao was playing Abigail or someone like that. Hey, Memory Lapse, welcome. We're getting our Party of the Week set up here. And if you just tuned in, I statted out Usula, who is Usula's sister. And we're going to be making a mod or an adventure or something based in the time that he's only a barbarian and that she's still alive, if you remember his story from last night. I don't know, because it sounded like you had a sick nephew or something, if I recall. Hopefully he's feeling better, though. Okay, so anyway, you get the idea here. We're balancing our strengths and our weaknesses. Who's going to be the muscle? Who's going to be the face? Who's going to be the perception monkey, right? So it looks like Abigail might be the one that you want on lookout, especially if she has a loud mouth or something. She's a walking siren. So who's going to be the perception, and who's going to have different skills? Who's going to be the knowledgeable one? There's not really like, well, who's the one who can resist poison the most? That's kind of weird. But you can see who your beefcakes are. And then Dex is kind of like Dex and Int are kind of the two skill monkey stats. And also, like, Dex goes into stealth. Who's going to be our stealther? /lockpick / whatever. And then we can also just look at the archetypes of what we have here. Well, we have a rogue, so he'll be, whether he takes the proficiency or not, whatever he is, let's say that Memory here is playing Paylor, even if he's not proficient in stealth, he should be naturally dexterous and will be better at it, presumably. So here we can go, up here I put a note that she was born into her pact. That's a roleplay note, and we can compare roleplay notes. Down here we could put, concerned about each other or something along those lines. You can also put in this kind of a comparison. You don't have to do this specifically with your play group, but you can put here the things that he's proficient at, so you can compare it easily. Let's come back over to Paylor here. Arcana, athletics, history, intimidation, investigation, perception, and persuasion. So now if we write out only the skills that they're proficient at, because that's going to be where they're going to tend to be better, we can then sort out our party and our roles by skills if we don't want to do it by abilities. Or we can do it by powers. So for instance, we have Dura, by being a paladin, has healing. Thanking. Yeah. Well, I don't know. She has a decent charisma. She can thank people well. Bat her eyelashes a little bit. Healing, tanking. Well, down here, as a bard, bards also get healing and maybe support magic. And then we come up here, and Warlock, Warlock is offensive magic, ranged offensive magic. But then we come down to Usula, and his fighting style is melee weapons. And so now you're breaking your characters. You've put the heart and soul into them already. They're living, breathing characters, but now we're going to decompile them into the things that they do to try and, you know, Rubik's Cube them into a functional party and say, okay, well, yeah, it looks like our party's good here. Or if we're all building our characters together, we can almost go round robin and say, oh, well, if you're going to be the stealth one, I'll be the lockpick one, or I'll be something else. And then you can make these adjustments to balance out your skills. Having skill redundancy is not necessarily bad. It doesn't even hurt to have a backup. You know, if you can somehow like lace it so everyone has a primary and a secondary, and hopefully they share those among one other person in the group, if it's possible. But you want your characters to each shine and do something in the party. And we've just given you, like, we've taken the party and put them through a prism, and we've just now opened up all of these options to find ways to finagle through storyline reasons, mechanics, skills, etc., to make this good and balanced party. Okay, so with this, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to take this off because it's getting my noggin a little warm. Get some water to refresh myself. You guys and girls out there, do the same thing. You know, do some stretches. You know, say hi to your pets if you have them. And I'll be back in, 5 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, but I won't be gone that long. And when we come back, we're then going to put on our DM hats and look at ways that we can spotlight a character by making a kind of a bare bones outline of a story. And then instead of going full detail into the development of the story, we're going to talk about tactics to spotlight your characters along the way. Let's go over. Here's our short rest.